July 1962. Harlem's 125th Street is calm until three out-of-place faces appear in a black sedan. For years, Bumpy Johnson's alliance with the Genovese family and a $75,000 per week profit pact made this street untouchable, protected by hundreds of eyes and an unbreakable code. But what happens when a group emerges, immune to all the old rules, threatening not just the profits, but the balance of power itself? Behind the myth of Harlem's defense lies a singular story of the only Mafia hit squad Bumpy Johnson couldn't stop. What makes one incursion so dangerous, it nearly brings an empire to its knees. Money flowed through Harlem in steady, measured streams, some of it visible, most of it hidden under layers of coded ledgers and whispered agreements. At the center stood Bumpy Johnson, the recognized broker between Harlem's black underworld and the Italian Mafia. Every week, thousands of dollars changed hands in numbers rackets alone, a daily lottery so popular that it became Harlem's unofficial economy. Gambling houses, after-hours clubs, protection fees, and narcotics all fed into the system. By the late 1950s, federal agents estimated Harlem's illicit trades generated up to $75,000 a week, a figure that dwarfed most legitimate businesses in the neighborhood. The profit-sharing arrangement that kept this machine running was simple in theory, but unbreakable in practice. Since 1935, after Dutch Schultz's bloody exit, Bumpy and the Genovese family operated under a silent pact. Harlem's black operators controlled the streets, but a cut, often cited as 10 to 15%, traveled south to the Italian bosses. These payments weren't just tribute, they were the price of sovereignty. As long as the money arrived on time, Bumpy's territory remained untouched. No outside crew could muscle in without risking a response from both Harlem's enforcers and the five families' own soldiers. This arrangement did more than line pockets. It established a kind of charter for Harlem's underworld, a set of unwritten rules that protected local businesses and kept violence in check. Even the city's most notorious racketeers respected the boundaries. Anyone hoping to skim from the numbers or push product on 125th Street knew the cost. Pay the tribute or face consequences. The result was a rare equilibrium, one that allowed Bumpy's network to flourish, while the Genovese family enjoyed a steady, low-risk income stream from a territory they didn't need to police directly. The scale of Harlem's underground economy was staggering in its reach. On any given day, numbers runners darted between barbershops, restaurants, and corner stores, collecting bets that would be tallied and taxed before the sun set. Protection payments flowed from nightclub owners and street vendors who understood that Bumpy's name meant safety from both police raids and rival crews. Even the law, at times, seemed to work around this arrangement, with officers accepting envelopes or looking the other way in exchange for quiet streets. But beneath the surface, temptation simmered. Outsiders watched as money moved in thick, untraceable bundles. The promise of a share in Harlem's weekly haul, tens of thousands in cash, week after week, was enough to draw the attention of anyone hungry or reckless enough to challenge the rules. For years, the balance held. But every system built on profit and trust is vulnerable to ambition, especially when the rewards are this high. Night after night, Harlem's streets pulsed with quiet surveillance. Bumpy Johnson's network ran deeper than most outsiders could ever guess. Men in sharp suits patrolled the avenues, blending in with the late-night crowds, their eyes always scanning for anything out of place. These weren't just muscle, they were the first line of defense. Each man trained to spot a new face, a suspicious car, or a shift in routine. Every block had its watchers. The paper boys on Lenox, the shoeshine kids on 7th Avenue, even the old men playing chess outside the barber shop. Their job was simple: notice everything, forget nothing, and pass word up the chain. At the heart of this web sat Bumpy himself, collecting fragments of information like a chess master gathering pieces. He built his intelligence system on trust and loyalty, recruiting from within the neighborhood. Waitresses at corner diners, bartenders pouring drinks at Small's Paradise, and numbers runners weaving through back alleys all served double duty. They listened for whispers of trouble, clocked the comings and goings of strangers, and reported every detail through carefully chosen intermediaries. Messages moved fast but quietly, relayed by word of mouth or coded gestures, never written down, never left to chance. This living, breathing warning system kept Bumpy one step ahead of rivals and the law. When a strange car lingered too long on 125th, the license plate was memorized and relayed by a street vendor before the engine cooled. If a new face showed up at a nightclub, a bartender would note the accent, the company, and the drink order. By sunrise, Bumpy knew whether it was a cop, a rival, or a nobody. Every piece of information was weighed and filed away, cross-checked against a mental ledger that grew by the day. Force was used with the same precision as information. Bumpy's patrols didn't just walk, they projected presence. Their matching suits and calm demeanor sent a message. Harlem was protected, and any outsider thinking of making a move would be noticed long before they could act. Violence was rare, but never random. When it came, it was targeted, a warning to anyone tempted to break the unspoken rules. A numbers runner who skimmed from the take found his shop closed overnight. A small-time hustler working for a rival crew might wake up to find his car torched, but never a hair on his head touched. The point was always made, but the balance was never upset. This system wasn't just about keeping the peace. It was about protecting a $2 million quarterly stake, money that depended on stability, not chaos. The entire neighborhood became a network of sentinels, each with a personal stake in the order Bumpy maintained. Outsiders, even those with Mafia ties, understood that Harlem was different. Here, every move was watched, every stranger tracked, every signal relayed, until the whole community felt like one organism. For years, this invisible web held strong, catching threats before they could grow. The idea that anyone could break through, let alone a crew as reckless as the Gallos, seemed almost unthinkable. Joe Gallo never cared for boundaries. In a world built on silent agreements and fixed lines, he was the wild card nobody wanted. By the early 1960s, Gallo earned his nickname the hard way, not through madness, but through a brand of ambition that made even seasoned gangsters nervous. He moved through Brooklyn's underworld with a recklessness that felt almost contagious. While other mafia crews held to tradition, Gallo's crew kidnapped their own bosses. In February 1961, they snatched Joseph Magliocco, Frank Profassi, and two other high-ranking men, holding them for weeks while demanding new terms. It wasn't just a power play. It was a declaration that the old rules no longer applied. Gallo's reputation grew with every violent act. He orchestrated public shootings, plotted daring escapes, and staged his own brand of courtroom drama. The press called him unpredictable. His enemies called him dangerous. Some whispered about mental illness, pointing to wild eyes and bursts of paranoia. But there's no record, no psychiatric file, no prison report confirming a diagnosis. What set Gallo apart wasn't clinical madness, but a willingness to do what others wouldn't even consider. He turned chaos into strategy, using fear as both shield and sword. Inside his own crew, loyalty was measured in nerve, not blood. Gallo handpicked men who could stomach the unpredictable, men who would follow him into a gunfight with nothing but a promise. Their base on President Street became a fortress, a place where plans were drawn up over cheap whiskey and whispered threats. The Gallo brothers, Joe, Larry, and Albert, turned their backs on the Mafia's strict hierarchy. They saw the five families' rules as a cage, and they were determined to break out, even if it meant burning every bridge behind them. Harlem, to Gallo, was never a protected kingdom. It was an opportunity. With the Profassi family distracted by internal war, the usual respect for territory vanished. Gallo's crew saw Harlem's riches as up for grabs: numbers, rackets, protection money, the steady river of cash that had always flowed north of 110th Street, where most outsiders hesitated. Fearing Bumpy Johnson's reach, Gallo's men pressed forward, convinced that speed and surprise would win out over tradition. This approach made them impossible to predict. They struck without warning, ignoring the signals and boundaries that kept the peace elsewhere. Bumpy's intelligence network, so effective against careful planners, found itself chasing shadows. The Gallo crew's moves didn't follow the usual patterns. They thrived on confusion, betting that no one would see the next play coming. For Bumpy, this was more than a territorial threat. It was a strategic nightmare. He was up against an enemy who didn't care about profit, only about making a name. In a world where every move was supposed to make sense, Gallo's unpredictability was the most dangerous weapon of all. Inside the Gallo crew's Brooklyn headquarters on President Street, maps of New York's criminal territories were studied like blueprints for a heist. Harlem, with its steady river of cash and thinly guarded profit channels, stood out as the most tempting target on the board. The old Mafia code, respect the boundaries, pay the tribute, meant nothing to men who thrived on disruption. Joe Gallo and his brothers saw opportunity where others saw warning signs. The numbers racket alone, with daily bets flowing from hundreds of Harlem storefronts, promised a windfall that dwarfed what most Brooklyn operations could scrape together in a month. Estimates from police reports pegged Harlem's illegal economy at up to $75,000 a week, a figure that made even seasoned mobsters pause. But for the Gallos, that was only the beginning. Protection rackets, gambling dens, and heroin markets, all ripe for the taking if they could break the neighborhood's legendary defenses. Planning sessions in the President Street apartment stretched late into the night. Gallo's men pored over street maps, marking routes for potential entry and flagging businesses known to pay Bumpy's enforcers. They debated how to bypass the local eyes, paperboys, barbers, waitresses, who formed Bumpy Johnson's first line of defense. The answer, they believed, was speed and surprise. Where most crews would try to buy off insiders or send quiet feelers, the Gallos preferred shock tactics, a daylight shakedown, an unannounced visit to a numbers bank, a threat delivered in public. Their goal wasn't just to steal a share, it was to make a statement. If Harlem could be breached, no territory in New York was truly safe. In this war room atmosphere, profit was the lure, but reputation was the true prize. Gallows crew wanted to be seen as the only outsiders bold enough to hunt in Bumpy Johnson's backyard. Every dollar squeezed from a Harlem racket was proof that the old rules were finished. The Gallows calculated that the chaos of the ongoing Prophecy War would distract the Commission and the Genovese family long enough for them to make their move. With the Mafia's attention turned inward, Harlem looked vulnerable for the first time in years. The plan was simple in its ambition: strike fast, collect tribute directly from frightened business owners, and force a confrontation before Bumpy's network could react. If the Genovese family protested, the Gallows would argue that the profits weren't being shared fairly, that Harlem's wealth should be open to anyone with the nerve to take it. This was more than an attack on Bumpy Johnson. It was a challenge to the entire Mafia order, a test of whether tradition or audacity would rule the city's underworld. For the Gallo crew, Harlem was no longer protected ground. It was open season, and every move was a roll of the dice. On July 14th, a black sedan crept along 125th Street, its windows rolled up against the summer heat. The car moved slow, hugging the curb, pausing just long enough to draw a second glance from a street vendor. Inside, 3 men sat in silence, their faces unfamiliar to anyone who knew Harlem's rhythms. They wore delivery uniforms, but their eyes never left the storefronts. Normally, a new car would have been flagged by a paperboy or a numbers runner before it reached Lenox Avenue. But that afternoon, the usual watchers missed the signal. Maybe it was the uniforms, maybe the car's plates, maybe just luck. Word never made it up the chain. The sedan completed its circuit, stopping at 2 gambling spots and a numbers bank, then vanished into traffic. By the time Bumpy's lieutenants heard whispers of strangers asking for tribute, the men were already gone. For the first time in years, an outsider crew had slipped through the net. The old warning system, built on trust and sharp eyes, had gone blind, if only for an hour. The breach was small, but the message was clear. Harlem's defenses weren't as airtight as everyone believed. Nat Pettigrew slammed his fist on the table, demanding a swift answer. Around him, Bumpy's lieutenants rattled off options: retaliation, street justice, a public show of force. The breach on 125th Street had exposed a weakness, and the old codes demanded blood. But Bumpy sat silent, weighing more than pride. His mind ran through numbers and consequences. He knew what war would cost. Every gunshot, every body on the sidewalk would draw the NYPD in force. Past crackdowns had swept up dozens, sometimes hundreds, of Harlem's own. Numbers runners, club owners, even innocent bystanders. The last time violence spilled into the open, police locked down the blocks for weeks, and profits vanished, almost overnight. Bumpy's notebook, always at his side, held a single line for days like this: "Don't defend your name, defend your business." He understood that the Gallows thrived on chaos, hoping to bait him into a fight that would cripple Harlem's rackets and invite the 5 families to pick apart what was left. Pettigrew pressed for action, but Bumpy saw the trap. He chose discipline over rage, telling his men, "Let them think we're slow. Let them forget we're watching." Instead of meeting violence with violence, he began looking for a solution that would outlast the next headline, a move that would protect both his people and his profits. On July 16th, A single envelope left Harlem by trusted courier, bound for a midtown office controlled by the Genovese family. Inside, a note addressed to Vito Genovese himself, brief, direct, and unmistakable in its intent. The message outlined the breach on 125th Street, describing outsiders collecting tribute without authorization. But Bumpy didn't threaten violence or demand street justice. Instead, he invoked a clause buried deep in the unwritten rules of Mafia business, the Territorial Protection Agreement. If the Genovese family failed to keep their end, protecting Harlem's sovereignty, they would forfeit 5% of their cut, a financial penalty that hit where it hurt most. The courier route was mapped with the same care as any numbers run, switching hands twice to ensure no interception. By the time the note reached its destination, the Commission's representatives were already aware. The message was clear: either enforce the old agreement or watch profits bleed away. No shouting, no blood on the pavement. Just a cold reminder that even in a world ruled by muscle, the real power lay in who controlled the terms of business. The Commission's silence in response spoke volumes. Within days, the Gallo crew's presence faded from Harlem's streets. No shots fired, no headlines, only the quiet restoration of order. In a world obsessed with flashy power grabs, the real currency remains discipline and restraint. Today, criminal empires still rise and fall, not by violence, but by who adapts when chaos knocks. The lesson endures. Lasting power protects its house without burning down the block. In every city, that calculation still decides who survives and who disappears. Drop your thoughts below if this story changed how you see power.